Hi everyone, today we have a generator. It is a older style Briggs & Stratton flathead. I believe it's a 10 horse. The decals were gone, but when looking up the model number, I believe it said it was 10. Person that gave it to me said that they live in the middle of nowhere, which I will contest to. It did take me a while to drive out there. But it's a 5,000 watt 6250 max surge, so it's a decent machine. I've used one of these, in fact, almost exactly like one of these. In fact, that one was my old one. Pretty much exact same thing. But the person said they lived in the middle of nowhere. Power went out all the time. This, for whatever reason, they said just it had a fuel problem. So they purchased a new carburetor. They then went to their in-laws, and the guy I was speaking to was specifically not very happy about that one. For a good point in time until the Carb came over. Carb not fixing the problem, so he just posted it on the internet, and now it's mine. I'm not gonna say how much I paid for it because it wasn't that much. But at the same time, it is dirty. It may or may not make power. If anything, I got this because I have a chipper that I was told had a bad block because a branch, ironically, hit the block and cracked it. When I looked at it, that appears not to be the case. So I'm hoping it's going to get this running, but not going to go off on that. What I'm going to do, put a little fuel down the throat of the carb, or just carb spray or something. These posts actually hold it in place pretty securely, so I'm not too concerned about that. The fuel line is disconnected, and the gentleman told me that when they got the new one, because after they got a car problem, they just went and got a brand new one. They drained the fuel out of it to use that particular power outage, and he wasn't joking. It's completely gone, so that's nice. Nothing like getting rid of 5 gallons of old fuel. It's not that easy. I always hear people say they put it in their cars. Oh, I don't know about that one, but I think I'm going to. That drill has a piece of tape on the trigger. You're not supposed to have a load, but I want to test the output. It's plugged into the 120 output. We're going to spray a little carb spray down the throat. I want to see if the engine turns over, engine runs, and if it makes power. So these 3 things I want to check. So let's go ahead and get started with that. So there is an unfortunate part about this whole story is because I got it for the motor. The motor that I had all the bits and pieces, and I'm only able to find this for the air cover. I don't have the actual bracket. So if this does make power and I don't have a knock or anything, then I will have to buy or try to find, I don't think I have one, but try to find the bracketing for this so it has something. Maybe even make one, but that's pretty ghetto. Not that there's something wrong with being ghetto, of course. Switch is set to on. Oh, looks like it has the clutch. Man, that's hard to pull over. Is the plug gets it connected? No. Huh. I checked the oil, but let me just double check. The oil was a little low, so I don't know if the spark was just being cut because it has a little oil cut off, which is a good possibility. or if it just has a whole lot more problems than I imagined. And naturally, this is when my tape decides to not be tape. But I did refill it. So how about we put some more good tape on the drill and give it a try. It doesn't need to be pretty, just needs to hold it down. Okay. Try this again. Of course. That's what happens when you're not used to 29-degree weather. Everything is just difficult to do. Oh. No dice. I mean, there's definitely compression in there. Perhaps the little oil sensor is failing me. Where is that little wire? Maybe it's the other side. Of course. It's the type that you have to completely take the nut off in order for it to even work. I'm gonna go ahead and do that real quick. So this is probably my fault. I figured when it set off that this pointing down was off and this, like so, was on. And no. If you actually look at the switch, it's the opposite. So this entire time I've been pulling on it when there's no spark. So I suppose our issue was spark, just not the right type. Now that we know on is on and off is off, let's try this one more time, shall we? And the plug is an Autolite plug. So it's not horrible. It's also not great. And whoever put this in put anti-seize on the threads, which isn't horrible, as long as you don't put too much, and they didn't, so I'm happy about that. I just don't really see a need for anti-seize on a small engine plug. Vehicle plug, I'm sure you can make an argument for. I usually just put a drop of oil. But that's just me. Now the plug wire's not wanting to go back on. Oh, is this a sign of how this generator is going to work? There we go. Okay. We have our cheater. Now, when you do this, you also want to check the throttle. Make sure it's not locked. It's not. I should have mentioned that earlier. Okay. Yeah, it's on. Okay. Still nothing. Of course, a lot of the fluid did just kind of empty out of the carb. Trying to get it back there. Maybe that would be good. Oh. Okay, well, our problems persist. Just spray it directly down the plug hole. I double check for spark and everything seems fine. So we can find where I put that spark plug. Of course. Oh, there it is. Excuse me. Then we can put the, here we go, plug back in and give it a second try, or a third try, I guess, technically. If not, we're gonna have to get the compression tester out. You see that? Looks like we do have a little motion. Let's see if we can do that again, except like this. Oh, there we go. Okay, we're not going to do that much longer, but we do know it works, and I did see some power going through there, so that's good. Now, when he gave it to me, he said that he did try to replace the carb. Every single time I've ever seen a aftermarket carb, the jets are too small. So what I'm going to do, not going to worry about the cover, not going to worry about anything like that, and take this out. On the one that I showed you earlier, I have a drill bit that I usually like to drill it out to. I'm going to drill out the jet. So let's go ahead and get started. Like I said, these studs are special. They're like snowflakes. But you have to get a special type of bit. See the little pattern in there? This is a E5. You can take a pair of vice grips and try to take it out like that. That's probably going to be a bad idea though. And you potentially could use a 1/4 inch, just normal socket, but the chances of rounding those off pretty much guarantee. Actually, let's put that back in a little bit, and then we'll have something to hold the carb in while we take the fuel line off. We don't need that fuel line right now. In fact, it's just going to be annoying to have, so we're just going to get that off. Okay. So now we could, in theory, and I do have the original carb, so if we need to, we can just go back to that one and see what is wrong with it. But in my experience, it's almost always, this is just a problem with the jet. Let's go take a look at it. Here we go. So something to kind of go over is I drilled out the jet for this identical engine on a different video, the one I showed you. And like I said, these jets are the downfall of this. Nope. If it would just be a little bit bigger, it would work. That drill bit, excuse me, hiccups. Fuel is pretty good. This is kind of our problem size. Smells like that's all carb cleaner. which is worrisome because it got on the cover your ears. Do not want it on that seal. We're just going to see what size it is. And if it is this size, then we have a problem. If it's not this size, we're going to fix the problem, put everything together, see what happens. I do have another one of these, so if I do mess up, it is there and ready for us. No, it seems fine. I mean, the guy said he just put it on, so it definitely appears clean. I don't know what number this is, but I took a caliber and it is 1.05 millimeters, and it is not fitting in there. Let's make it. Now the side does have a adjustment, so if we need to, we can adjust or to fine tune it. This isn't really idle, and that's mainly for idle, but it will affect the high end as well. So if you're finding that you're doing this and you made a mistake, that one was too small and one was too big, and now you're just kind of thinking, do I have to stay with the small one? No, you do not. You really need to. Oh wow, that was hardly anything. I'm kind of concerned there's a fuel pump problem. Well, now, if anything, we'll make it bigger if we need to. But anyway, so if one was too big and one was too small, that can be your friend. I don't think that one's adjustable at all. There's not another jet to take out. No. I mean, I'm just going to make up numbers. Let's say when it's running at 3,600 RPM, 95% of the fuel is coming from that main that we just drilled out. The remaining 5 is coming from the pilot or the idle circuit in there. Or I guess technically it is right here, if I remember correctly. I think that's a vent. Don't quote me on that one. But anyway, so looks like our seal's okay. If you're just hunting a little bit, especially when it's under load, adjusting that can be your lifesaver. So unfortunately, while taking this off, I got a phone call, so I need to go take care of some business real quick, and I'm going to postpone this until tomorrow evening, so I'll see you then. It's a day or two later. The garage door is closed because it's like 19 degrees outside, but I wanted to take a look at the generator again, and a couple things that I want to do before, because we know it makes power. We don't know if it's good power, or I should rephrase, we don't know if it's adequate power or if it's under load if the engine is worn. Based on what I feel, I don't think that's necessarily the case, but something I was having a problem with is this clutch. And when looking at this screen, I think was off of a, if I had to guess, a 5-horse. It's a lot smaller and it's red. A lot of the 5 horses were red. But for the time being, that should be fine. What I want to do though is I want to take that clutch off. Not going to really show that because I'm going to make a video specifically on the clutch. But it has a tendency of squealing, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. So the carb is done. It's over there. We'll go ahead and install the carb I did end up buying the cover for the air filter, the little mechanism and everything, so that's around here somewhere. Wasn't too happy about it, but I have a feeling this is probably going to be a good, fingers crossed, knocking on wood, good generator. So I'm going to get the clutch off and we'll go ahead and get started. Got the cover and recoil and all that stuff taken care of. I was going to put the fuel line back on, or the carb on the fuel line first, and man, this is just stiff and just not wanting to cooperate. Afraid of breaking it. So I'm going to spend a little time and don't want to break those tabs off, but I'm going to replace all the fuel line with good normal fuel line. So I'm going to go ahead and spend a couple minutes doing that. I'm not going to attach it to the tank quite yet because there's something I do want to do before then as well. Before I do the rest of the fuel lines, so how this ends up working is this line goes to the carburetor, this line goes to the tank, this line goes to the vent and the crankcase. Now the vent and the crankcase will kind of pressurize it, and the pulses will help move the fuel, hence fuel pump. So what we are going to do, the person that gave this or sold it to me gave me a story which, okay, I could kind of believe, but I'm going to do this anyway. The story originally was this: he got this a long time ago and it was working fine, and then last year it started to have problems because they, like I said, they live in the middle of nowhere. Next thing you know, it was running out of fuel because he would take the carb off and it would always be empty, well, close to empty, very, very low. So he thought that was weird, so he changed the fuel filter, which case it's not the paper filter, it is a just like a screen filter. And at that point he said it kind of seemed like it was working pretty good. However, shortly after, started to have something very similar to the problem, so he decided maybe it wasn't the filter, he needs to go ahead and buy a new carburetor. So we put the new carb on, and that did not solve the issue. So at that point he was completely out of ideas, because we don't really need to worry too much about. So what we need to do now is we need to kind of service this fuel pump, because I believe that either the carb was having problems, maybe water, I don't know. He doesn't have any problems with his current generator, and he took the water or the fuel out of this one. So I would hope not, but we don't know. What we do know though is that it was having fuel problems, and this is definitely a key point of failure, potential failure. So we are going to get this cleaned out. It's a pretty simple little device, so it's not too hard. The only thing is when you crank it down, you really need to be careful, because this is plastic. If it is at all warped or over tight into one area and starts to bow out or anything, you can cause problems and you'll just have to replace it. Just put a little carb spray. Oh, my towel. Sorry. My work area is way too small for the stuff I do now, so it's a constant hassle. But don't worry. Hopefully there will be move being performed here shortly to help fix that problem. I mean, that's my hope. And there, it looks pretty clean. Basically just cleaning all this off and out. So what happens over time is just like the fuel pump on the 5-horse Briggs or any of the Briggs, fuel will start to degrade the integrity of the fuel pump. So you get this kit, 393397. And what that is the new diaphragm for the fuel pump. And for whatever reason, the diaphragm kits are really easy to get, but the actual fuel pump, this exact fuel pump, I should say, it's a little harder. You can get them, but they're definitely nowhere near as easy. So in the kit, we have a new gasket, a new diaphragm, a new spring. I think we have a cap for the spring in here. Oh, we do. We have more goodies. Let's just take, oh, that was a good spring. That's the bad spring. Take the rest of our items out. Something in here. There we go, that little spring. I think that's all that comes in here. It does appear so. And the kit is actually very reasonably priced. So with all, just like with all the other ones, you need to pay attention to how it's laid out. So there's a diaphragm. It's not horrible, but it definitely could be repaired or replaced, I should say. That's weird though. I thought the little spring went right there. Could be, oh no, that little piece goes right there. Okay. So let's get this cleaned up as well. I don't want to say this is uncommon, but it's definitely a point that I would rather just get rid of the possibility now and never have to worry about it than using it for like 10 minutes, thinking, oh, it's good, and then giving it to a neighbor, a friend, selling it to someone, whatever, and they use it for 10 minutes and 29 seconds, and then it dies. And all because I didn't put this diaphragm in there. You know? I just don't want to have to deal with that nonsense. Pretty much at all. I'm gonna go spray this again. You want to keep your carb spray completely away from any of the consumable items. And make sure it's nice and dry. Cover your ears. I'm gonna use the air compressor real quick. Nice and dry. Okay, so you're going to make sure that's nice and clean again. I'm gonna put this diaphragm on. I think the gasket goes on here, doesn't it? I believe so. I don't think it goes on the other one. Yeah, it goes right there. This diaphragm itself, I don't think is too important, to be honest, but since we have it, there's no point of keeping the old one, you know? This gasket's going to be a real pain, and or joy, however you want to look at it, to take off, I'm sure. Well, maybe not. I'm gonna take a little time. I'm gonna get that nice and clean. Now that's done, we are going to take our spring with said caps. We're going to put it down here. I need something to prop it up with. So I think if I remember correctly, it's easier to put the diaphragm on this instead. Or at least as a hole like this. Or maybe not. There we go. So now that's in there. We take, because the gasket was on the metal piece, we're going to take this one, put it right there, and then this we're going to put it, should be, let's see, that is going to be reversed, yeah. You can avoid all of this by just using a gravity feed system. However, when you do that, because of the location of the tank and how the... I'm trying to remember where that little spring went. It wasn't in here, so I'm not going to use it, but anyway. Anyway, by the fuel line, it's just going to be really hard to do so because just how it's set up. So there's probably a torque spec, just don't overdo it. Just firm, but not tight. Like I said, you don't need to do that. So this should go and pump. I'm going to put this back on and then install the carburetor, and hopefully we will be close to getting ready to hear this start up again. Well, we still have to do the tank, so let's do that next. This next part's gonna be a little hard to show you because I don't technically want to take the tank off quite yet, if at all. But it has this rubber grommet in there and this rubber on-off shut-off valve. That's really crappy and just, I don't like them at all. And considering the condition of the fuel line, I'm going to be putting in a better one, which in my experience are these. So how you end up doing it is you put this through a shaft, but you take, when you take the other one off, you put this into the tank, and then this is a really tight fit. So when you put it in there, take a little WD-40 while this is in the tank, of course, put WD-40, shove it through there, and the pressure opens it up and seals it off. Since we do also have a fuel pump, I'm going to be using a paper filter. We're not going to be using the little filters that came with the old fuel line, just the screen ones. So we're going to do the paper filter. When you do the paper filters, make sure if there's a direction on them to follow it. Usually there's an arrow. Yeah, so make sure to do that. I'll show you once it's done, but the important part is this goes in a tank first, lubricate the insertion end, and then shove it through, and that's legitimately it. It's pretty easy. You can move this, you can twist it around. I like to have this facing the back because it just makes turning the fuel on and off that much easier. So I'm going to put that in because let me tell you a story. When you know what, let's just do this. This is going to be story time with PNW. I, a long time ago, had a generator very similar to this one. I cut this too long, by the way, on purpose. I didn't know how much I needed. But anyway, I purchased it, fixed it up, did everything was running fine, and then I want to say a week or two later, this usually just comes right out. Let's see if we can get you at all in there. There we go. Maybe you can see. Anyway, so I got the generator going, and I mean, I didn't necessarily use it all that much because I have no need for it technically. But what I neglected to do is change this fuel shutoff valve. And because of that, naturally, because it's one of these cheap plastic ones, it failed. This is never an easy test when it's super hard like this. So the person bought it and was very upset that it started leaking fuel shortly after purchasing it, which would make sense. So ever since then, if I ever see one of these, if I haven't put it in, I will replace it. Yeah, this one's really in there. I'm gonna need a better view. I'm gonna have to be where you are, but that's why I'm gonna replace this. I don't want this to be a problem in the future. Understandably, I don't know what the condition of the engine is, but even if it's in need of a rebuild, this is still a good idea. Put the fuel line on. Fuel is in there. Fuel filter, all that. Carb is on. Choke is on. Now, it does have to fill the bowl, unfortunately, so we might be in for a wee bit of a pull ahead of us. But at least the clutch is good. Was surprising. I think we are going to get a load and put it on there and see what needs to be tweaked, if it needs to be tweaked. Something that was a tad worrisome is that it seems like it was hunting a little bit, but not like lean, it just sounded like something sticky, and this is very grimy, especially right here. So we're going to spray all that down. Get the grime off of it. Cover your ears. There we go. Get that nice and cleaned up. And then let's add a little bit, just a little. It's pivot points. So now Still seems a little weird. That's getting better. There we go. Okay. Now it's time. Let's try it again. This time we have a load, which is off. Yeah, off. That's, I think it's 18 or 1800 watts. And then we have our meter kind of gauge it. So this usually, for this style of generator, when there's no load, probably is going to be running like 130. Thank you. 130 volts, and then you put a load on it. It'd probably running at 62 hertz or so. Then you put a load, and usually, hopefully, won't go down too much, but the voltage should go down to the more appropriate, like 120, 122. Then these usually like to be around 2500 to really be in their sweet zone. But we're going to be doing 18. This should be fairly decent, fairly close. Choke on. Switch, I think, on. Yeah. There we go. I don't like anything I saw there. It's only roughly about 47 hertz. Gonna do a little investigation. Off camera, I have a Walbro Carb that was meant to be on a Briggs & Stratton, except I believe that was supposed to be on an 8 horse. I could be wrong. It's been like 4 years since I took it off. But I tried it and it runs a lot better. It still is lean, except this time I can put choke on about a little over halfway and it will run smooth. So that's telling me that it's just running lean. Now, these are a set of drill bits that I have purchased that I know one of these is probably okay because I've used them before for this exact engine. The engine is sitting 4 inches away from me. Excuse me, 4 feet. That's 1.45 millimeters. I put in 0.8. I believe, or 0.9, one of the two. It was under a millimeter. That's the exact same. What do we have here? That's 1.15. To be honest, I kind of think we're going to go with this one. So, what I'm going to do is, the reason why, well, let's see, is there another one that's semi-close to this? All these are really big. Not really. I'm hoping I'm not missing one, but I don't think I am. Could be. But I'm going to drill out the clone carb because I don't really want to mess with the good Walbro carb. Because if I need to, I can. In fact, I think I even have another clone carb. Yeah, I do. I have another clone carb, so if I need to start over, I can. So that jet is kind of, I don't want to say disposable, but if there's going to be a sacrifice made here, it's going to be that clone carb jet that came with the machine. And when I was looking at the carb that came with the machine, granted it wasn't working anymore. Oh, there's fuel in here. Let me dump that out. It seemed rather large, so that does kind of go with my thought that we are going down the right path of drilling out the jet. My theory about how they drill out the jets wherever this is made is they take a dart and then they throw it at a dartboard of the variety of sizes, and whatever size it lands on is the size they're going to be working on today, and all of them, no matter what size it is going to be going in there. That's the only thing that I could come up with why it says this fits a 10-horse engine. Now, something I also did when looking at the Walboro carb is I looked at and see if there's anything that's also interchangeable. I looked at the diameter of the choke, and it seemed to be relatively about the same size, maybe a little bit bigger, maybe a little bit. And then, more importantly, however, I wanted to make sure this was the same size. And this is actually roughly a tad bit bigger, just maybe like a 1/16 of an inch. I was going to measure it, but from what I saw, it was a little bit bigger, which, you know, isn't going to be a horrible thing. It's not really going to do anything because the intake is a certain size. I suppose if you really wanted to, you could custom make one and get, I don't know, however many horsepower that would be. 1/8 of a horsepower, 1/4 of a horsepower, more. But even then, that's pretty wishful thinking, I'm sure. So let's take this off. Like I said, this is 0.8 of a millimeter, or maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was the 0.15. Yeah, that was a 0.15. Never mind. So that was the one we just used, and that one's no longer good. So I'm glad that we did this on camera. What's the next one? The next one's going to be a significant change. But that significant change might just be needed because it doesn't even run with this size of jet. 1.74, that might be too significant. That's too big, the other one's too small, that's too big. Let's try these two. I think these were the two same size ones. 1.44. That one's a good contender. I'll separate that. Because 1.15 is what we have, and that's too small. I mean, that's a little bit smaller. Let's just go with that one so we can say that we went at least in semi-order. And the rest of them are either going to be too big or definitely too small. Oops. Helps if you turn it the right way. So if we are doing 1.4 millimeters, that is 0.3 of a millimeter a difference. So we're going to be drilling this out like 25%, 30% larger than what we already, but we did. One second, I have to look at it. Now it actually looks pretty close to the carb that I put on there, the original Marlboro carb. The hole is pretty large. So it's going to be significantly larger. So let's go ahead, give that a try. I'm going to blow this off again, put it all back together, put it back on the machine, and we'll give it a pull. Before I do that, I did kind of run across something that was interesting. I counted the turns when I pushed this all the way in. It was out 6.5 turns. That seems excessive to me. I'm going to put it at 1.5 turns. So if we need to, that could be an adjustment if we are too lean, just a little too lean. But it kind of helps, makes me feel better. That was so out that I don't even think it'd be adjusting anything. It's pretty much wide open. I might as well just take that needle out. So, you know, I have a pretty good feeling, knock on wood, that this is probably going to be a good thing. If not, then we have another carb we can use for parts, and we have a good Marlboro carb as well. And if need be, one of the reasons why I didn't even use the carb that came with this machine is the person, which I'm not sure why because it wasn't really all that dirty, completely stripped out the brass nut, and it's pretty much stuck in there, so that's not good. Let's try it again. I'm going to turn it out 2 times, but you don't need to see that. Fuel's on, carb is on. I didn't put the filter on because it's just a giant pain. I have to keep putting all that stuff on, so it's just barely enough to get it running. I think that's choke. I need to fix that little pin, but whatever. So I definitely did a lot better. I'm going to take a little time. I'm going to take out that screw, probably, let's do 4 turns. Right now it's at 2. Seems to be doing fairly okay, but 2 might be a little bit more. I decided to do a little investigation on the old carb. This is the old one, and I was able to take out the emulsion tube and the jet. So that's good. It's clean now. But this is the condition it was in. Like I said, it's not horrible. I mean, it's not good, don't get me wrong, but it's definitely cleanable. And when looking at the jet on here, the jet is not, it's barely a millimeter. It's like 0.9 or 0.9 I think was the biggest one I could shove through there. So we were already at 1.4, I believe, 1.3, I don't remember. Rewind if you don't remember. And it's not working, it's too lean. I went up to 1.6 and it's too rich. So I think 1.5 is going to be our magic number. However, I do not have a 1.5. So I think my next course of action is going to be cleaning this carb. You've seen 1,000 videos. I'm going to take the bowl off of, Probably the other clone carb, because I don't want to disassemble everything a couple times, so I'm just going to take it off that one. We'll put it back on and hopefully this will work. But something I did notice is this throttle plate is significantly smaller. Let's put this in perspective. I measured the clone carb. Where's my there we go. And it was 28 millimeters. This is about 26 and 3/4 millimeters. So it's not, I guess, significantly smaller, but it is smaller. And this is a real wall burrow, so that's good. I'm going to clip this off, get this cleaned up, and I will bring you back once it's ready. Put the new clean carb in there. It has so here's the thing. I took the old Walbro carb that I had from a previous motor and I compared it to, and they're almost identical, except the other jet was almost exactly 0.85 millimeters, because that is what I was able to shove through there, and it was fitting pretty tight. The other one that came with this machine, you can tell it was just a little bit smaller. I have a 0.65 and it had some wiggle room. I don't have anything in between, so I have a feeling it's probably 0.8. So what I did is I put the 0.85 from my old one. That way I don't have to ruin a genuine jet. And then put it in there, twisted out the adjustment screw 2 turns. And I also bent the tab for the governor a little bit because I noticed it was running slow. That can also be part of our problem. Probably not, but part of it. I think the only thing to do is to pull it and see if it works. Oh, and also, this entire time, this heat gun has been off. It hasn't been on. So it's not like I'm starting it with a load, which is actually it's not bad for it, but you shouldn't do it, because you can cause problems with the generator head. Those problems aren't necessarily hard to fix, but they are problems. And when you need a generator, you generally don't need to or want to fix problems. So what I'm looking for is roughly 61.5 hertz, 62 hertz. In fact, I think I might just bend that a little bit more right now, because last time I checked, it was only like, it was surging, but it would only surge to like 59, 57. Very, very small amount. You don't need to go crazy on it. In fact, don't go crazy on it. If you overbend it and you switch it to like 80 hertz or something, that can be bad. You could run the risk of damaging your generator head as well. Okay. You know what? I think that's pretty much good to go. I don't really think I want to adjust it anymore, to be honest. Okay, well, that's about it. I think I'm satisfied with it. The reason why you see oil over there is I had attempted to tip it over a little bit to kind of take a look at a few things on the bottom end while I was waiting for the ultrasonic cleaner, and apparently let's just say it almost fell off the table. So at that point I'm like, nope, but a little bit of oil did come out of the crank vent, so I replenished it. Good 10W30 oil. I just changed the whole thing really because I didn't know how much was in there, and it was running a little bit, and when I looked at it, it was definitely black, so this oil hasn't been changed for a long time before when I got it, so there's definitely some sludge. So I took that sludgy oil, put good fresh oil in there. So what did we learn today? Changing or cleaning your fuel pump is a good idea. If you have a Walbro carb, it's definitely better to keep that carb instead of getting an aftermarket carb. In addition to that, if you do have an aftermarket carb, probably like 1.5, 1.6 millimeter drill jet is what you're going to need to get this thing running if you have that style of carb. If you don't, you're going to have to get an actual Walbro carb. And the reason why I went to the other one is I know these machines are usually tuned to run a little bit lean, and when it runs lean, it can fluctuate in RPM a little bit, and that's just not good for your power. So I like to make sure that I don't have that problem, so that's why I went a little bit higher. If it has a little bit more fuel, it tends to not do that, so that's why I went to the other jet instead of the other one, the one that came with the original carb. We learned it's always a good idea to put a new fuel shutoff valve in and a fuel grommet because we don't want it to leak. Definitely a good idea to change the fuel lines, and we're good. Okay, well, I think that's really about it. So if you like what you see, keep watching, subscribe. Definitely check me out on Instagram at SmallEngine101. And if you have any comments, leave them below. If not, I'll catch you in the next video. Have a good day. It runs, and it runs good. I'm pretty happy with it. Everything seems like it's good to go. 62 hertz standard or no load at all, and then put a 1800 watt load, which is it's rated to 5000, so 40% roughly, a little lower of the maximum capacity. Went down to like 60.5, 60.8, something along those lines. It's a little lower than I would have liked, but it's not horrible. And other than that, what did we learn? The carb, if you have an aftermarket one, you're definitely going to be drawing out for a much larger size, 1.5 to 1.6 millimeters for the one I have. Yours could vary, but I'm sure if you got yours from Amazon, you're going to be doing something very, very similar, which is odd because the one behind me, I was doing a little research and it wasn't that large. So I think the carb that this person got was just either all around bad or all around just not meant for this engine. Fuel pump, very important. Always when you're doing something like this, it's never a bad idea to clean it and reservice it, because you don't want to have that to be a problem. You're already taking off the carb, so why not do it? Fuel grommet, same thing. You're already doing all this work while it's in the cleaner or anything else. Change it, put a new fuel shutoff valve and grommet, especially if you have that crappy plastic one. Those are prone for leaking in my experience. The metal ones, or the semi-metal looking ones, I've noticed don't really seem to leak nearly as much. At least not as quickly. Other than that, yeah, just normal tune-up stuff. Walbro carb. Like I said, we had to drill out the jet a little bit on the other one. It wasn't working. The jet that's in here, I don't know if I mentioned it, is the other carburetor jet that was off the other Walbro. So it's a little bit bigger. It's like 0.8, I think, was the one that came out of this engine. The one that came out, the other one was 0.85. That 0.85 I think is important because the additional is important because I noticed With the other ones, the exact same engine, everything, when you put a load on there, it tends to hunt, and that's usually a sign that it was kind of lean to begin with. I mean, it will find itself, don't get me wrong, like it's probably exactly where it should be, but I like to richen it up just a little bit because then it has a little extra power and fuel to go up into that healthy engine speed for that load. And when you have fluctuation in a generator, it changes the power output, and if you have something delicate, which you probably shouldn't be connecting to this machine to begin with, but if you have to and it's an emergency, you want to lower the chances of it damaging itself. So yeah, that's about it. So what I'm going to do now, it's really not much left, is I'm just going to clean it up, put a little paint on there. I'm going to put some arm rails on it because carrying it like this is not the easiest, and call it good. I'm going to run outside for about another 10 minutes or so with a load, double check to make sure, but so far I think it's okay. If there's any problems, I'll make a second video. Okay, if you like what you see, keep watching, definitely subscribe, put a thumbs up, follow me on Small Engine 101. I'll catch you on the next video. If you have any questions about the jet sizing or the carbs or anything, feel free to ask in the comments. Have a good night.